Over the course of playing Wuthering Waves and replaying Genshin Impact to re-immerse myself in the controversial world of gacha games, I've managed to 1. Not end my free trial on life when I played Wuthering Waves, and 2. Ended my streak of avoiding Genshin Impact like it's the literal plague. And while I've grown to loathe some of these gacha games, some definitely more so than others, playing Zenless Zone Zero I think is a step in the right direction. Although it took a few steps backwards and fell off a cliff regarding some aspects, but nonetheless it stumbled in the right direction. With a very eye-catching style that harkens back to the games of the early 2000s, while mixed with a flair of current generation design, and action-oriented combat with a tight storyline that people can genuinely follow without confusion. ZZZ is one of those games which I was prepared to absolutely dunk on, but was genuinely surprised, and playing it was definitely a breath of fresh air. This video was made with the support of my patrons and subscribers. Consider giving this video a like and subscribe to my channel. More info in the description and comments below. To see how this game performs against the very low bar that its contemporaries have set, we'll need to know what the hell is Zenless Zone Zero. It's a free-to-play action role-playing game that was developed and published by MiHoYo, the same guys who made Genshin Impact, Honkai Star Rail, and Honkai Impact 3rd. This game was released for PC, PS5, iOS, and Android. It came out July 4, 2024 to positive acclaim, although I have some gripes with the game that we'll talk about later. The story revolves around the daily activities of Belle and Wise, siblings that manage a VHS rental store by day, which is surprising because VHS is apparently still a thing in the far future. And they also moonlight as a glorified GPS guiding system by night. Sorry, not sorry. But in universe, they're referred to as proxies. They basically assist those who willingly go to and or had the misfortune of being thrown into these massive black circles. That's somehow very reminiscent of the Las Vegas sphere. Which are called hollows. Thankfully, ZZZ learned a valuable lesson of not throwing words around like the game is being rated by how air quotes complicated it can make the dialogue. It made following the dialogue much easier and less of a snooze fest that feels like it wants to alienate anyone who hasn't read ahead of the game. Anyway, while the story progresses, sometimes you will be treated to a comic book style cutscene in lieu of those standard talking head scenes, but I'll get back on this later. I don't know why this little thing got me engrossed in the plot since it's such a simple thing, and yet I appreciate it so much. Maybe because this is the first time in a long while that a gacha game actually managed to tell a coherent and entertaining story, enough for me to actually pay attention to. In the character department though, it still reeks of that anime kookiness that's either a hit or a miss for a lot of people. Animes are of course still an acquired taste, and trust me, I've watched a shit ton of anime to know that anime is indeed an acquired taste. But while the characters are kooky, there are some gems hiding in the game. I'm not gonna spoil it, but one of the cutscenes was definitely a callback to a certain horror flick from the 80s that was made by Stanley Kubrick. It's also surprising that this game manages to weave the story smoothly and transition to a new gameplay element that they want to introduce while at the same time seamlessly introducing you to new Eridu and 6th Street, along with other places and activities of interest. Unfortunately, a very common reoccurring way of presenting dialogue to the player still plagues games like these to this day, and I'm talking about the talking heads. Most of the time, dialogue in this game consists of 3D models of the characters talking to each other in this front-facing view. That's very reminiscent of the interview scenes from The Office.
I saw Wedding Crashers accidentally. I bought a ticket for Grizzly Man and went into the wrong theater. After an hour, I figured I was in the wrong theater, but I kept waiting. That's the thing about bear attacks. They come when you least expect it.
It only begs the question that, if they had the 3D models ready to be presented, what's stopping them from actually creating a scene that has the characters talking to each other in the world that they're in? Admittedly, this definitely presents another hurdle, one of which is animating the 3D models while in dialogue. And unfortunately, ZZZ is a very dialogue-heavy game, so they'd be animating a shit ton of scenes. I know this makes my point moot, but I can't help but think, what if they took the extra mile to animate all of those scenes? It would probably make the dialogue much more engaging, especially when contrasted with the comic strip style scenes / exposition. The gameplay is reminiscent of other games in this genre. We're kinda in a situation where you've seen it once, you've seen it all. Fortunately, there are some things in the combat that shake the monotony of this genre. So as you can see here, the combat generally plays like Honkai Impact or Genshin Impact, with a few new mechanics to spice things up. If you're about to get hit by an enemy, they've added a system to either dodge and counter or switch to another character, then parry the said attack, which are called dodge counters and evasive assists. All this relies on timing to activate. Fortunately, they went down that route instead of making it a brain-dead mechanic that you just have to click to activate. Anyway, dodge counters kinda feel like your standard dodge then attack in any other game, while evasive assists feel like a parry in a way. But regardless of whatever they are in the common gamer vernacular, the point is, it's there to provide you with options as to how to fight an enemy. Then there's your chain attack, where you can choose between any of the two available party members and the proxy to continue with their own set of attacks. Now, while the combat is good and all, traversing or adventuring through the hollows and thinking about it has become a thorn on my side. A friend of mine even called this game a literal TV surfing simulator. That's the level that we're at with this design choice, so we might as well talk about it. On one hand, the TV world featured in ZZZ has been done multiple times throughout gaming history. The last time I've seen a system like this was in Final Fantasy Dissidia in 2008. I didn't have a problem about it then, and in ZZZ, I'm mostly fine with it. It plays kinda like a puzzle game sometimes, but sometimes it's just a very linear experience that divides the events of the missions. And on the other hand, games like this would have made the world and what's happening to the story much more engaging if you can actually dive inside the hollows and see all the things being talked about by the characters while in the hollow. Case in point, Persona 3, 4, and 5. It's not like MiHoYo are incapable of making a small world per hollow as shown in their experience making their environments in their previous games. I mean, it doesn't help their case that some of the combat sequences or events have a map size where you run from one combat event to the other. So it's actually feasible to make a small hollow style world, so I'm more or less in this fence-sitting situation where I think that the TV world is fine, but traversing throughout the hollows would have been better and engaging if the characters themselves are the ones being shown, instead of this mascot running around inside a TV. And lastly, I can't help but think that all of this was done to accommodate the mobile crowd and their hardware limitations. Don't get me wrong, I'm not about to gatekeep games and I love all y'all gamers, but I feel like if what I think is true, then this game just got held back from its full potential because MiHoYo decided to pander towards a huge market all with expendable cash. And you can't help but sigh and say that it is what it is, I guess. Another game held back by some CEO or shareholder's dream.
Money, money, money.
Anyway, outside the hollows, they kept it small as well. There is no grand map that you can run around in, but instead, you have this small street/neighborhood, though what it lacks in size, they make up for character. 6th Street oozes with style and is definitely focused on delivering the experience right at your doorstep, instead of running around a giant map looking for some John Doe NPC that you'll most likely ignore when you talk to, all in the name of finishing a quest faster. Hey everyone, only 13% of you guys are subscribed, and since you've made it this far into the video, consider giving this video a like and subscribe to my channel. This helps me grow and figure out which of my content you guys enjoy the most. Anyway, back to the video. Since we started talking about the overall look of this game, we might as well talk about its aesthetics. And man, there is a lot to talk about, but let's start with the menus. Although they didn't do it for every possible menu screen on this game, they did their due diligence and took a page from Persona 5's book, and did a whole slew of different animations for the characters in some of the menus. Ever since Persona 5 got released, I'm definitely one of those people who suddenly started to give a shit about how menus look and whether or not they're engaging to look at. Next thing that's worth talking about is the character design for the agents. While the characters like Nicole being front and center kinda ruins my point a little bit, in doing my research for this game and checking all of the playable characters, I've noticed less of a reliance in over-sexualization, but in unique looking characters that fits the role or job that they're doing, and at the same time, not overly designed as to not look like they don't belong to the world that they're in. They even feature a freaking bear as a playable character. A bear in a gacha game. You suggest this 3 to 5 years ago and they'd think you'd be raving mad, and the CEO would probably shoot you on sight for suggesting anything but boobs, butts, and thighs. Lastly, I'd like to talk about the artworks and in-game commercials/media. As someone who draws as a hobby and edits for this lowly YouTube channel, I highly appreciate every single unique piece of art that they had to do for this game. From the thumbnails of what's being talked about on the internet, to the newspaper being shown in the newspaper stall, to the cover of the movies being rented out in the shop, as well as the VCR cover art that was done for every individual chapter of the story that looks like every cover art for every genre of movie ever made. It shows that this definitely took time and hard work, and I don't want this to be ignored or discounted by people, least of all me. And this might just sound like a lot of gushing, but it also serves the purpose of immersing you more and more into the world. A world with personality is better than a half-baked setting that is gorgeous to look at, but is incredibly boring to interact with. And the first Descendant should definitely take notes. Now that I'm done gushing about the artworks in this game, let's talk about the progression. For this one, they kept it pretty simple. You'll be more or less focused around unlocking or praying to RNGesus to help you unlock all of the playable characters or agents. When you're done testing out your luck, you can then level up any of your agents, upgrade their skills, and customize their stats and effects using the equipment menu. Equipping any agent with a W engine and drive discs aid in the customization or min-maxing of all the agents. And as you repeat this cycle, any character that you draw once again while pulling can be upgraded again, and in this case, you will be able to unlock the character's perks. This forms a neat gameplay loop of unlocking an agent, gathering resources and or currency, leveling up, gearing up, and then try to unlock the said agent once again to unlock all of the agent's perks. And in closing, I haven't had this much fun with a gacha game since Arknights. It got to a point that I was looking forward to playing this game after work. It does exude the same combat as any other action gacha game, but at least it does so in the manner that is conducive to having fun and being unique. But I do hope for more options in terms of combat aside from just swapping around characters, and if you're hoping for a different set of attacks, skills, and chain attacks for the agents, unfortunately, agents only get such a narrow slice of attacks and skills that there isn't really any space for customizing how you fight, in the same way Prototype or Devil May Cry did. The game kind of runs into the problem of doing the same thing many times that autopilots start to set in, and at that point I start to question whether or not you're playing the game for the fun of it or are you just grinding away because of FOMO. Compounded by the sometimes engaging and at times too straightforward TV world traversal, then the game really kind of runs itself into the wall. But don't let this take away from the fact that Zenless Zone Zero is a fun game. ZZZ has become this weird outlier in my book, and I didn't expect to be singing its praises. I genuinely have a negative prejudice when it comes to gacha games, and I guess because of this, I didn't expect much from ZZZ. Now I see it as a game that should be a sort of benchmark as to what could be possible if you manage to make a more than halfway decent gacha game. I even told a buddy of mine that ZZZ doesn't play like your usual gacha game. The way the story progresses while at the same time introducing more and more gameplay elements felt like I was playing a single-player campaign from a AAA game instead of a gacha game. Hopefully, other would-be action-based gacha games would follow, or if not, improve upon the foundations of this game. But at the moment, we're just gonna have to make do with what we have. Thank you very much for watching, and consider joining my Patreon. Until next time.